You know how it is walking home from school as a little kid, right? Carefree, nothing to worry about except what TV shows you're going to watch or games you'll play. At least that's how it started for me back in third grade. I'm making my way down this alleyway I always took as a shortcut when I hear, "Hey, hey you." I spin around and there's three of the neighborhood bullies: Trent, Chase, and that prick Jeremy. Jeremy's the ringleader, of course. "Where you going?" Pissant Jeremy calls out, that stupid smirk on his face. Just heading home from school," I stammer out. The three of them just laugh. "Oh, we'll get you home real quick. Don't you worry about that." That's when they came running at me. I barely had time to turn before Trent clocked me right in the mouth. I'm stunned as Chase grabs me from behind in a headlock. Jeremy winds up and bam. Fist connects with my gut. "This is just a little preview of what's coming," he sneers, winding up for another punch to my face. Jeremy's fist slams into my cheek, snapping my head to the side. I can taste the blood pooling in my mouth as I crumple to the ground. "Hold him down," Jeremy barks. Chase shoves me onto my back, pinning my arms over my head with his knees. I'm frantically looking around, praying somebody will walk by and see what's happening. But the alley is deserted. Trent is unbuckling his pants now, a sick grin twisting his face. "You're gonna get a nice warm shower." Bitch, my eyes go wide as I realize what's about to happen. No, please, don't." But Trent has already started pissing on me, soaking my hair, my shirt. The warm, putrid liquid is gushing over my face, into my mouth. I can't help but choke and gag. Jeremy and Chase are laughing like hyenas. "Yeah, get a good taste of it, pussy." The stream of urine finally stops, but Chase keeps me pinned. Jeremy leans in close, his rancid breath hot on my face. "You tell anyone about this, and I'll fucking kill your parents." You hear me? I can only nod, sputtering through the piss and tears streaming down my cheeks. Jeremy wipes his soaked hand across my face. "Your place is just up ahead, right, bitch? Why don't you run on home to mommy?" Chase finally lets me up, and I scramble to my feet, still coughing and sputtering, the putrid taste of Trent's piss filling my mouth. The three of them are just laughing as I stumble away, my clothes soaked through. I can't believe what just happened. Those sick fucks actually pissed all over me. I want nothing more than to tell someone, to get those psychos in trouble. But Jeremy's words are ringing in my head: "I'll fucking kill your parents." I know he's batshit crazy enough to do it too. He and his brother got busted last year for lighting an old lady's garage on fire. So I keep my head down, trying not to make eye contact with anyone as I make my way home, tears mixing with the urine streaking my face. When I get in the door, Mom's cheerful greeting dies on her lips as she takes in the sight of me. Oh my God, what happened? I mumble some excuse about slipping in a muddy puddle at the park. She looks skeptical, but doesn't push it. I peel off my soaked clothes, leaving them in a reeking pile, and spend what feels like an hour in the burning hot shower, scrubbing my skin till it's raw, gargling mouthwash again and again. But I can't wash away the sense of violation, of utter humiliation and degradation. I finally crawl into bed, my eyes puffy from crying, and lie awake trying to make sense of what happened. Why me? Why did they do something so sadistic and cruel? I know I can't tell a soul, not Mom, not Dad, not anyone. It's my shameful secret to bear. Eventually, emotionally drained, I cry myself to sleep. But even in slumber, there's no escape from the stench and the haunting echo of their laughter. The next few weeks were honestly a living hell. Every time I stepped out of the house, I was just waiting for Jeremy, Trent, and Chase to reappear and put me through another twisted gauntlet of torment. I was constantly on edge, jumping at every sound, every time I turned a corner. Sleep was difficult with nightmares of them cornering and pissing on me again, filling my dreams. It started with little things at first. I'd go out to get the mail only to find our mailbox smashed and pried open, letters and bills scattered everywhere. Or I'd wake up to a flaming bag of shit smoldering on our front porch. Subtle reminders that they knew where I lived. Then it escalated to worse acts of vandalism. Eggs and toilet paper strewn across the house, obscenities spray painted onto our garage door, and worst of all, my dad's gorgeous '68 Mustang key to shit with deep nasty scratches over every panel. We had home insurance, thankfully, but it didn't cover everything. And after the fourth or fifth time calling the cops, they just started blowing us off. Kids pulling pranks, they'd say. That is until they slashed all 4 tires on both of our cars one night. Dad was fucking livid. He spent all night sitting guard with his rifle, daring those little shits to try something else. But they were too cowardly to engage with an armed adult. Despite Dad's simmering rage, despite Mom constantly asking me if I knew who the culprits were, I kept my mouth shut. I was petrified that uttering Jeremy's name would sign their death warrants. So I suffered in silence as the bullying escalated over the next few months. Our cars, our home, everything we owned was seemingly fair game to those psychopathic little bastards. Things somehow managed to get even more twisted a couple months later. I was taking a different route home from school, trying to avoid running into Jeremy's crew. I cut through a couple backyards, hoping to just get home without any issues. That's when I heard the loud barking and turned to see two snarling pit bulls bounding towards me from the yard I was cutting across. I barely had time to react before they were on me, teeth snapping at my arms and legs as I desperately tried to fend them off. Then I heard the all-too-familiar voices joining the commotion. "Hold him, Roscoe. That's it, Butch, sick balls." Jeremy and Trent came strolling around the side of the house, laughing their asses off as I frantically tried to get the ravenous dogs away from my face and throat. Chase appeared soon after, carrying a ratty old kennel. "Get him in there," Chase shouted, setting down the kennel and opening the wired door. That's when the real beating began. Trent grabbed a thick leash hanging on the fence and started swinging it full force, lashing me across my back and shoulders while Jeremy and Chase took turns punching and kicking me. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, begging them to stop, but they were totally relentless, egging the pit bulls on to tear into me even more. Finally, I collapsed in a bloody heap, barely conscious. I could feel them dragging me, mustering the last of my strength in one final struggle before everything went black. When I came to, I was trapped inside the cramped, filthy kennel in the backyard. Boards were nailed across the door, preventing any escape. Butch and Roscoe were laying on either side, growling menacingly any time I moved. Through the wiring, I could see the back porch where Jeremy, Trent, and Chase were sitting drinking beers and laughing at my misery. A couple times one of them would come over and taunt me, throwing in some dog treats and ordering me to eat them. "Go on, eat up, bitch. This is your life now," they'd cackle. I laid there trapped in that cramped, feces-stained kennel for what felt like an eternity. Every time I drifted in and out of consciousness, one of those sadistic fucks would be there taunting me with more dog treats and jeering insults. At one point, Jeremy squatted down and got right in my face, his rancid breath making me gag. "You're just a fucking animal, man. This is where you belong, in a cage getting treated like the bitch you are." He grabbed a gnawed-on bone from the ground and shoved it through the wiring. "Here, eat up, you fucking mutt." When I refused to take it, he reached in and smacked me hard across the face. "Do it. Eat the goddamn bone." With no other choice, I forced myself to lick and slobber over the repulsive bone under his scrutinizing gaze until he finally walked away, laughing hysterically. As the hours dragged on, I overheard them debating about whether they should put me out of my misery or leave me overnight for the dogs. A fresh wave of panic set in, realizing these unhinged psychopaths might actually kill me. Finally, as the sun began to set, Trent sauntered over and pried off the boards across the door with a crowbar. "All right, pussy, I'm gonna let you crawl on home to your mommy." He swung the door open with a sickening grin. "But pull any shit about telling and I'll bury you and your family in these goddamn kennels." Got me. I could only nod weakly and drag myself out, every inch of my body screaming in agony. Somehow I managed to make it the 2 houses over to my place, pulling myself along on my hands and knees and leaving a trail of blood. When my mom opened the door and saw the horrific state I was in, she completely lost it. I'll never forget that blood-curdling scream. Mom rushed me to the emergency room while Dad stayed behind calling the cops. I ended up needing multiple surgeries to repair the damage those animals inflicted: shattered bones, torn ligaments, vicious bite wounds. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. Once I was somewhat recovered, the police brought me in for questioning. I knew I had to finally come clean about the bullying after all this time. But when I started revealing the details and mentioning Jeremy's name, the lead detective just shook his head dismissively. "That O'Ailey kid, yeah, we've run into issues with him before. But you gotta understand, he's had it pretty rough." The prick actually made air quotes with his fingers. "Broken home, no father figure, that type of thing." I was stunned into silence. After everything they'd put me through, all the torture and threats of murder, and this cop was making excuses for them because Jeremy's dad wasn't around? With mitigating circumstances like that, it's pretty much a free pass for acting out, the detective continued. He doesn't need juvie, he needs guidance from male role models. We'll pull him aside, have a little chat. That's as far as he got before I completely lost it, screaming every profanity I knew at this useless sack of crap cop. I told him in graphic detail about the piss shower, the beatings, being locked in the goddamn kennel like a feral animal. His face turned burrow red, but I didn't care. I unloaded years of rage and anguish onto this complacent prick personifying the systemic failure to protect me. When I was finally spent, he just cleared his throat and said they'd look into it and hustled me out. We both knew nothing would come of it. Jeremy was born on the right side of the tracks to get away with anything short of murder. I was on my own. So began my life of taking extreme avoidance measures and security precautions. After that useless interrogation from the cops, I realized I truly was on my own in dealing with Jeremy's crew of sociopathic bullies. From that point on, my life became a constant game of avoidance and evasion just to be able to go to school without getting my ass kicked on a daily basis. I meticulously planned out intricate routes to take getting there and back home, taking back roads and alleyways, cutting through yards and parks, anything to minimize exposure, and always had multiple escape paths if I spotted them lying in wait. There were times I'd be blocks away and actually sneak up and overhear them talking about where they planned to jump me that day. That gave me a chance to reroute and throw them off my trail. It was like being a little vigilante, watching my own back since no one else would. When I'd finally make it onto school grounds, that didn't signal any relief. I timed my trips to my locker like a goddamn safecracker, only going when I knew Jeremy or his goons weren't around to slam my head into the door. Which happened more than once despite my precautions, leaving me dizzy and seeing double in the hallway. I started intentionally arriving late to classes to avoid passing periods when they could freely roam and attack. Teachers just thought I was a typical shithead teenager, never making the connection as to why I was perpetually late with bruises and busted lips. It was utterly degrading and dehumanizing, having to live like a hunted animal in what were supposed to be innocuous places of learning and growth. But Palsy, you've had a leash around your neck in a doggy kennel. I guess there's no indignity you won't suffer to just feel safe. Jumping at every sound, jerking my head around at anyone passing too close, pre-planning emergency exits from each classroom and stairwell. It was an exhausting way to exist, draining me of any sense of trust or security. This was just my shitty reality. No matter how meticulously I planned out my safety routes and avoidance tactics, eventually Jeremy's crew would catch up to me. Maybe I got too complacent, too predictable in my patterns, or maybe they just got lucky spotting me at the right time and place. It usually went down in the hallways between class periods when the sheer volume of students provided perfect camouflage. I'd be switching out books at my locker when suddenly, wham, my head would get violently slammed into the door, stunning me as hands grabbed me and shoved me against the lockers. The next few minutes were always a flurry of fists, slaps, knees jamming into my gut as Jeremy and his boys took turns pummeling me from all angles. I learned pretty quickly to just go limp and protect my head. Fighting back was useless and only prolonged the beating. What always disgusted me the most were the handfuls of so-called friends who would inevitably be standing there watching impassively. Whether out of fear or apathy, they never once stepped in or tried to pull those maniacal bullies off me. Just spectators to my systematic humiliation and abuse. Sometimes one of the braver ones might feebly call out, "That's enough," man, before slinking away at the mere threat of also catching hands. But for the most part, my friends just averted their eyes as I got the shit kicked out of me, curled up on the hallway floor, trying to breathe through the blood and tears. "Quit your crying, you little pussy," Jeremy would bark, punctuating each word with another brutal kick to my ribs. "This is what you were born for, to be my personal punching bag." No matter how badly I was hurt, how many bones were cracked or teeth knocked loose, I never uttered a word about the full extent of the bullying to parents or teachers. By that age, the shame and fear were already too deeply ingrained. Those hellish years of being ruthlessly bullied and tormented finally came to an end once I graduated high school. Jeremy and his psycho crew apparently decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore once we didn't have to share the same spaces every day. Maybe they got bored with me as a human punching bag. Or perhaps even in their fucked up minds, there was some perverse code about only brutalizing someone while you had a captive victim under the same institutional roof. Either way, I quickly fell off their radar. College turned out to be my salvation in more ways than one. For the first time, I could reinvent myself without that lingering cloud of fear and abuse following me around every day. I filled out and bulked up, finally hitting an unexpected growth spurt. And most importantly, I got the hell away from the shitty toxic environment that enabled monsters like Jeremy to keep preying on me for so long. The vicious cycle of bullying was broken at last. I actually began regaining some sense of self-esteem and basic trust in humanity that had been so brutally torn away throughout childhood. My life didn't seem destined to just be a constant gauntlet of avoiding confrontations and beatings. But even to this day, certain things like using public restrooms or being in cramped spaces trigger visceral flashbacks and crippling anxiety attacks. I've been in therapy for years to try and overcome the deep psychological scars from the repeated abuse and degradation. It's gotten easier, but that sense of vulnerability being a defenseless kid never completely goes away. If I'm ever lucky enough to have children of my own, though, you can be goddamn sure I'll do everything humanly possible to protect them from ever suffering what I went through. We'll get families, schools, law enforcement, whatever it takes actively involved from day one to shut that evil shit down before it can metastasize. And if all else fails and some jumped-up bully decides to make threats or take things to my household, well, they'll quickly learn why having an unresolved trauma like mine should never be trifled with. I'll show them a degree of fear and force that would make even the most sadistic torturer think twice before letting harmful thoughts linger. Maybe that makes me just as much of a hypocrite as the cowards who watched me get pummeled time after time. All I know is the cycle of abuse stops with me. On that, you have my nothing left to lose word.